Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of Necessity versus Commodity. I've got the amazing John Renken here. Now, he is an amazing sales coach. He's got a company called Sales Platoon. He is ex-military. He's done amazing things through his life. Six-time MMA champion. Also climbed things like Mount Kilimanjaro. An amazing guy. Very successful in businesses. Very successful as in sales coaching. And right now, his mission in life is actually to help veterans become better salespeople, better entrepreneurs, and business owners. But he does work with all levels of sales professionals. Some are online, some are corporate. And him and I are definitely going to talk about that because there's a huge difference between online sales, especially in the high ticket market, and corporate, not only in like jobs and commissions and base salary, but the sales structure themselves can be very, very different. And so, John, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you. So
Hey
let's
man,
start
thanks for
off.
having me on.
What started you off kind of doing into sales? First off,
My parents were broke and I needed school shoes.
okay. So how old were you at that age?
I was 11. I started doing door-to-door newspaper sales.
Wow. Okay. And how long did you do that for? Door to door is a hard thing. At 11 years
Yeah.
old, makes even that's a pretty sweet story. So how did you do
I
it?
think most of us had newspaper routes if
Yes.
you're over the age of 40, probably, you know. Yeah, so I did that all the way until I started detasseling corn
Okay.
when I was 14. Then by the time I was 15, I switched to telemarketing and was doing telemarketing sales from the time I was 15 till 18. So I've been in sales pretty much minus a couple of like teenage jobs my whole life.
Yeah. Wow. And then you went into the military at age 18, I'm assuming.
A little bit later than 18, but yes.
Okay. And when did you start kind of so number one, thank you for your service. When did you leave the service and kind of move into civilian life and trying to figure out, hey, what do I want to do now?
I don't know that I still know what I want to do now, but
That's beautiful.
1996 is when I got out of the army.
Okay. Okay. And how did you kind of let's kind of how did you fall into the sales coaching?
Yeah, so I get out in 1996, go to college, and in the 90s, I mean, what were you going to do for money, right? Like real money.
Yeah.
And so I got hired by a cell phone company as we started transitioning from the brick phone, if you remember the brick car phone,
Oh,
to flip
100%.
phones. And so here I am, I think I'm 22, 23 years old, making $6,000 a month selling cell phones.
Beautiful.
And was doing a lot of B2B cell phones because companies were starting to really buy into cell phones instead of pagers. So, so my entire college life, I was in sales. And then in 2000, I became a government contracting sales rep and did B to G sales for 20 years. So I was
Wow.
doing government contracting, doing multi-million dollar deals.
Wow. That's a major history there from your door to door. Phone sales is tough to begin with. I actually had a friend where he opened several different Verizon stores, and I know that that's a pretty tough market as well. And then you get into corporate, and now you're kind of coaching people. Now, the individuals you coach, do you see majority of them are in the corporate realm? Are they business owners with brick and mortar, or are they the online individual?
Yeah, it's a little bit of mix of all of them because I'll work with anybody that does sales. And now obviously the strategies and techniques of somebody doing an online high ticket offer are radically different than somebody who's doing software sales,
A
right?
1000%. Yeah.
Or even like medical device sales, right? That's more of a door to door, even though it's not door to door, it's business to business. But the strategies and the techniques might shift a little bit between like an online guy versus a B2B guy. But at the end of the day, like all of sales is pretty much agnostic at its fundamentals. And then it's once we get past the fundamentals that we can narrow it down and really get into a niche of what do you need to do to succeed in this vertical of sales.
Awesome. It's one thing when I'm working with a client too, my main focus isn't sales coaching, but a lot of my clients, they do need some of that, and I don't teach a script. I don't give a script. I teach frameworks, and I think you have a very unique perspective like I do on things. One of my really good friends, he actually does government contracting as well, sales for that. And like his devices he's selling are like 100,000 to $1 million devices to airports and things like that. It's a totally different thing. My younger brother does medical staffing. And so you're doing 100 cold calls a day to medical facilities all over, trying to get to the right person. Sales cycles can be 3 months up to 18 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so it's totally different than like a 1 call or a 15 call triage move to a closer that so many high ticket people do. Now it's really interesting in a space that I see because I'm older than a lot of these 20-year-old kids too. So we didn't have the online sales, you and I, at a younger age.
Yeah.
You see these 20-year-olds come in and they start making 10, 20, 30K a month online and think that why would somebody work for with a base pay, right? And they don't understand like the corporate aspect. A lot of them also don't want to, I'm not showing up to team meetings or I'm not doing this, that type of thing. They're two totally different environments, but I'm starting to see them blend together a lot. What are you seeing with it? Yeah. And what are you seeing how they're starting to blend together and make sense now?
So I'm trying to advocate for the blending together. So in a lot of my circles, I do not see them blending together. It is the online gurus do one thing and the corporate B2B guys do something different. And what I keep trying to express to both parties. So like if you're the online high ticket sales guy and you're not on LinkedIn, you're making a huge mistake, a financial mistake that's leaving thousands of dollars on the table. On the other side, when I'm talking to corporations, I'm saying if you don't learn from the high ticket guys and develop solid funnels that take people from point A to point B to purchasing decision, you're leaving thousands and thousands of dollars on the table. And I'm actually having this conversation with another company right now that's old school, smile and dial, 100 calls. And I'm like, where's your sales funnel? Where's your free offer? Like, why don't you have a social media presence? Why aren't you doing this? And so I really think that neither of those avenues are right, that the better answer is, why don't we learn from all from each other? And where this applies in B2B, then we should take it. And where this will apply in the online space, then we should take it. And I don't see a lot of that actually happening. And now there's some industries like B2G that funnel system will not work, right? Because of the government requisition system.
Yep.
But some of those principles of how do we generate leads, how do we create, curiosity, how do we get free offers in front of people to give us the space to speak, those principles could be adopted, but the funnel won't. But so every sales cycle has its own little quirks, and we got to work through them all together.
Yeah, I love your vision on that, and I couldn't agree more. It's one of the things with the online space. I've been in it for 10 plus years, and it was a wild, wild west show out there for a while. Now the market sophistication is getting a lot better. Also, it's not becoming as wild, wild west as what it used to be. And a lot of the businesses are going to last long term. I think they're starting to realize they need to adopt aspects of like a corporate foundation. And that, I think over the next 3 years is probably something that's going to be a lot more solid. And looking at the corporate side, everything, again, like you said, was smile and dial. I think a lot of corporations now are trying to bring a more personal aspect. But it's one of the things when I'm working with clients is building kind of an ideal buyer situation. So yeah. what you bringing that up of just smile and dialing, hey, if you're doing that, like if you're looking at a buyer, like what stage are they in? What information do we need to get them to move them quickly into a buyer? So a salesperson or a setter or whatever it might be can quickly move that into, a sale and generating revenue. Yeah. And they're a little bit behind, but I'm starting to see them catch up too. And so it's nice to see
in the B2B world too. They would really do themselves a favor if they watch how online funnel guys and the online coaches and stuff niche down, right? Yeah. So, take medical device, right? So maybe I'm a medical device rep and maybe I only work with heart surgeons, okay? Well, that's still a pretty broad category, right? Like, if you know, maybe there's not 50,000 heart surgeons in America, maybe there's 5,000. I don't know, but it's still a pretty broad category. Well, guess what? Inside that heart surgeon, who are the people that you have the most success with? Because how many heart surgeons do you really have to have as a medical device guy to make a really good living?
Yeah.
3 or 4.
Yeah.
So what do you find that works, and really narrowing your niche down to the most extreme level you can, and then using that strategy that the online guys use all the time of niching down, I think could be extremely beneficial in the B2B world.
I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting too. I think some of the blending is going to happen out of necessity. And then I think some of it's going to happen because the online space is getting so flooded. They're going to
Well,
have
I was
to.
going to say AI. Like,
Yeah.
at this point, we don't have a choice. You're going to either adopt or you're going to be replaced.
Yes.
AI is never going to really truly be able to sell for us because it can't handle the complexity of emotion and pain. However, all that lead generating work and funnel work and identifying potential niches and those kind of things, I think B2B has a lot to learn in that area. And I
Yep.
think the online space has a lot to learn in that area to come together. And if you're listening today and you're not already doing AI stuff, you're behind.
100%. I couldn't agree more. You know, and it depends on what you're using it for, right? And you also have to know how to use it. It's the same thing. When you were in the military, you were taught how to use your weapons. You developed skills how to use those weapons correctly and how to essentially be extremely deadly with those weapons. AI is the same way, and a lot of people don't realize what AI's power truly is. It kind of shocks me, actually. One of my good friends, he was sales manager for one of the top beverage distributors here in America. And we were talking about that. And I was showing him some of the stuff that I do with AI for my clients for lead generation and all of those. And he's like, oh yeah, we had some software too. And he pulled it up and like how general and generic it was. And I pulled up stuff that I have, and basically we went through and we spent a couple hours and set up his 6 months, and he's like, holy crap, dude. I'm like, yeah. You know,
They can do so much,
man.
They can create formulas on Excel. I mean, it just saves so much time and so much effort and tons of stuff that you can do with it.
Let's talk about the sales structure. You know, I love the fact that, you know, it sounds like you and I have the same type of viewpoint of a script will kill a salesperson. And you can't just take a script and move it from offer to offer or from industry to industry. So how do you teach people in sales? If you've got, let's say, 20 clients, one's on, a couple are online, a couple are their entrepreneurs, a couple are corporate. How do you coach sales then, managing those different variables?
Yeah, so I'm with you on script to a degree. And what I mean by that is I believe in script, but I believe in script as in the military, what we call it as an SOP. And what I mean by that is that we all have standard operating procedures on how we should do things in general. Where I don't go with script is that we have to personalize script, and we have to be flexible enough to be able to understand that structure of the script, and then to be able to pull out of it what I need for each individual conversation.
Yep.
Here's I think a couple of different things when it comes to script that become very valuable, but can also be your death trap. If you change what you do every single time, then what is your measure for your performance?
Yep.
Because you do something different every time. So you can't really narrow in what the problem is or what you do really well, because every time it changes. So you need script in some context, because otherwise, how do you evaluate performance?
Yeah.
And I don't mean from a corporate perspective, I mean from a personal perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So in the sense of an SOP, we need script. However, because people are simplistic and habitual people, we read a script and it becomes a very solid, unflexible, word for word TED Talk type of presentation. And the problem with that is that doesn't address the complexity of everybody's individual pain or problem, right? So what I do with scripting is I'm light on script as far as like, this is the way you have to do this. More of whatever you do, it needs to be the same thing every time so you can measure progress. Here's a script that I use. Take it, make it yours. Let's substitute out what doesn't work and find what does work. Right?
It's a beautiful explanation, and thank you for diving into that. And that is what I mean. Like I see so many people fail because the script they're going off. Here's the first thing you say. Here's the second, and you're reading off like you're a customer service rep, right? And nobody likes that feeling when it's happening to them. But I love your breakdown of how you said that. Like again, you need your SOP. Hey, this is section number 1. Here's the framework of what we need to figure out and get from it before we move into the next section, right? Yep. And move in. And I couldn't agree more with that aspect. And I think
here's the other part of that too, though. Yeah. Think about this. I'm not a medical device guy. I've never done medical device. That's a sales process I haven't done, right? You would have to give me a script if I was selling some sort of heart machine to a heart surgeon, because I wouldn't know what the hell to say. Like, I would be lost. So the only way that we get good at whatever the sales process is that we're doing is that we have some sort of structure, some sort of script, and we just beat that thing to death until it's ours. Yep. And we know what it says. Once you do that, then you need to have the flexibility to add, subtract, and then come up with what is your personality, your feel, but also that can be modified in the moment with the personality of the person that you're talking to. Yeah. So, and as an example, I'm a very much results, get to the freaking point. How much is it going to cost me? What's it going to make me? I don't give a shit about your graph. I don't care about your Excel sheet. I don't care what your teammate thinks. I don't care what Bob thinks. How much is it going to cost me? What's it do for me? How much is it going to make me? That's all I care about. Yep. So if you come to me and you talk in a very detective kind of process where facts figure, you're going to lose me as a sale, because I'm going to be like playing on my phone or something.
Yep. Yep.
So being able to morph that script to meet the personality of the person that you're talking to is very important.
I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that's why some people are really good in certain offers and roles, and then they switch companies and they tank for whatever reason, because the people that they're talking to changed, right? Yeah. And that is such an important factor. I did fitness sales for 20 years as a personal trainer, then sales manager, then my own business. Then I had a 8,000 heel rheumatoid arthritis online offer, right? Always did fitness, and fitness can be extremely hard, right? It can be one of those things that can be extremely difficult because people don't have a tangible ROI at the end. I'm telling them, hey, you need to pay me money to give up food you don't want to give up, to come in and work out that you don't want to do, and make time for something you don't have time for. And now you got to fucking pay me for it, right? Yeah. And then all the fears of like, dude, I've tried to lose weight in the past, all of these things. And so, but to your point of talking to every single individual, 5 years ago when I started switching and working with agencies, doing sales, fulfillment, working on different offers through that process too. And then talking to like people like my brother and other people I know in corporate sales, and, just always improving my skills, that it's totally different when you're talking to someone like yourself and it's a business owner. If you and I are having a conversation about me hiring you for your sales coaching is completely different than a fitness offer. Me talking to you, having you look at my services as a CRO, building marketing funnels, ideal structures for setting up to bring in the ideal buyer and make the sales process really easy. They're totally different conversations all the way around. And and people don't really see that lots of the time, which again is why it's important for the frameworks. So when you're looking at an offer, you brought up something unique about pain points, right? Like if I go, hey, John, so if you don't figure out how to get your marketing right, like, is your wife going to divorce you? that conversation doesn't fucking work.
No.
So how do you help somebody that's in certain offers to be having a discussion with the type of individual you are? Because also on each offer, we're going to talk to certain people that respond certain different ways, right? And so how do you manage that? Let's just actually not how you coach it, how you manage that as a sales professional.
Yeah.
Let's look first.
I tried to dig to what do you need? What do you want? Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what the offer is, right? So when I'm talking to companies about hiring veterans, I know what the pain points of the industry at large are. Now, that might not be your personal issue, but we know right now in this economy, hiring good quality talent is an issue for everybody. We also know that currently across the industries, there's an average attrition rate of 25%. Average, right?
Yeah.
Well, how much is that costing you? Right? So when that business starts to talk about that, just in this particular situation, right? They start to talk about the unspoken budget line. And what I mean by that is there's all these benefits and stuff that come into play when you're talking about hiring and firing or quitting, but those are hidden budget lines. So they don't actually financially prepare for them. So when I ask you, how much is it costing you in your attrition to go from one sales rep who's performing at quota to a new one who's not, and then all the benefits, what's that actually cost you?
Yeah.
And you go, oh, it cost me X, whatever X is. And I'm like, how's that feel? Right. And all of a sudden you go, because you all of a sudden see what that's costing you. Right.
Yeah.
And then if I go, well, I can solve that problem for $12K. Wait a minute, it's costing me 100, but you can do it for 12.
Yeah. It's a
no-brainer.
Yeah.
Right. So regardless of what the sales process is or the product or the service, you got to get to what's causing them pain.
Agreed.
Software sales, right? SaaS sales. What does your product solve? And then how does that financially or emotionally or culturally affect that company?
Yep.
So think about this. This is a real world example right now. One of the careers of future sales that's going to make people the most amount of money is cyber sales. Okay. So right now there are companies that are having 200 and 300 penetration attempts a day for all their proprietary information, data, client data, all that stuff, right? So if you come in, and I'll just use this as an example because it happened, there's a casino in Vegas that just got robbed. And they got robbed by a digital thermometer for a fish tank that then hacked their bank and took, I forget if it was millions or billions, all this money. So if I walk into your company and I can show you that you're exposed or that your client's data is exposed, how long does it take me to get you to feel that pain? Because are you a veteran too?
I am not. No.
Okay. So you might not have heard of this, but there was a data breach that affected the VA.
Yep.
People weren't getting prescriptions. That was a cyber hack, right?
Yep.
So if you're that company, the VA, and I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you, Scott, and I go, what would it cost you if all 1 million of your clients had their data breached? And you go, oh, and then I go, it's only going to cost you $100,000 to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've created a scenario.
Agree.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more. I'm glad you brought the cybersecurity. Actually, a year and a half ago, with one of the guys I worked with, actually, he reached out to me because I was a sales rep for another company and sold him into what we did at that time. And he's like, hey, I'm launching this new company and it's to work with XYZ companies, which is basically softwares and reoccurring and those type of things, because he had actually started 7 different businesses, scaled them all up, exited, worked with a lot of Silicon Valley and, softwares. So he was really good at viral loops and how to put them in. And one of the guys that we talked to and enrolled he was in the security, and it was all government contracting. And talking about that, like it's super huge. And he was having a hard time explaining the importance to some of the companies he was. Once we put in the right viral loops and changed some of the marketing around, like it's a very easy conversation to have once people know what you do, and it's kind of a no-brainer, and that's one of the things that I always, have discussions with the clients I work with of, you have to look at sales and marketing as a left hand, right hand, but you are not going to be successful if they don't come together. Right. And that's where magic really does happen. And that's where kind of like what you're talking about, the blending of, the online world with corporate world. I think that people are seeing a little bit of both. Now you brought something interesting about pain point, right? Of, hey, what, $100,000. I see this a lot when there's certain sales reps and they get into like this corporate type environment and they're talking to a mid-level guy. Right. And they're like, well, what's a pain point for him? It's the company's money. He doesn't fucking care. Right. So when you're talking that aspect, because that is struggles for some sales reps and it gets in their mind. And as well as I do, if you walk into an environment and you're already, it's like the guy that used to fight Mike Tyson when his prime, right? Like he stepped into the ring knowing he was losing. And you see sales reps walk in like that all the time because like, I don't know how to get pain points out of this guy. What are one of the things that you kind of use to bring that out so that you're actually addressing that stuff?
Well, first we have to get rid of the assumption that every pain point's financial.
Correct.
Right? Because the pain point might not be financial. Like you said, that mid-level guy, that's not his money.
Yep.
Right? So we have to figure out what is his pain point. Now, it depends on here's a great example. Okay. So let's talk life insurance. Okay. So life insurance, lots of people become millionaires selling life insurance. Pretty much everybody should have it if they don't. And what's really interesting about life insurance? Who do you think objects to life insurance the most? Men or women? Which one do you think?
Men all the way.
Men.
Yep.
Men.
Why do I need it? I'm not going to be here for it.
Yeah. Well, it's either I'm not going to be here or I'm never going to die. So what's the point?
Yep.
Right.
I don't need it yet. I don't need to think about it for 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So, however, why do you think that the women are the ones not objecting to life insurance?
Women buy off of safety 100%.
Right.
Yep.
So you think about this. So the guy is saying no, because I'm not going to die tomorrow. What difference does it make? Or I'm not going to be here. So what difference does it make? But the lady still, I don't know what the numbers are now, but by and large, men are still the breadwinners of our economy, right? Yep. So she knows if you depart tomorrow, she's screwed. Her kids are screwed. Yep. So life insurance is not a sell for the woman. It's a sell for the husband.
Yep, exactly.
Right? So what's the pain point in that situation to get the husband? Well, first of all, it's ridiculous. I mean, we're talking, if they're doing term, it's like $30, but and they still object, even at $30. But so what's the pain point to get that guy to move off of that objection?
And depending on the guy, that's one thing, it can be ego, it can be a status,
well, it's almost always ego.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Think about this. So if we're having the life insurance conversation, I'm going to say it more bluntly than I would in a sales, right? But I would basically be like, so Scott, let me understand this right. You don't think $30 a month or whatever the policy is worth it. Yeah. So let me just ask you a real point blank question. How long do you want your wife to wait before she has to remarry to take care of your kids? Talk about an ego hit there. Right?
Yep.
And you've got to get people to dig deep into their own reason and motivation or pain, because people are only motivated by carrot or stick.
Agreed.
That's it.
Yep.
It's either reward or pain.
Yep.
So,
and I'm glad you brought all that, because I couldn't agree more. It's one of those things you have to, and that's the thing, you have to know who you're talking to and what buttons you need to have a discussion around, right?
That's right.
And, again, I'm always thinking men is ego, women is safety, right? So and we need to talk to them differently on those characteristics. And going back to like the guy that I was talking about with his cybersecurity, his business was going great. He didn't need it, and the pain point with him was he had a goal to where in the next 24 months, he wanted to be selling this out of it so he could go to his next business, because this is really just a keystone, just one little step in the legacy he's trying to build.
Right.
And he thought he was going to be farther ahead than what he was. So he knew he wasn't going to make that 2-year mark. So our whole conversation was essentially, so John, the path you're on right now, obviously you're not going to hit that 2 years. What we're talking about, we could probably get that done next 6 to 12 months, and you can be moving on with your legacy. Right. And then that's that huge ego thing. Right.
Yeah.
The other thing is, the example I kind of use, like that mid-level person, and I'd like to get your opinion on it, because sometimes the angle that I'll approach it at there will be looking at them. Hey, it might not be the money, their money, it might be the company's money, but we're also talking about their job potentially could be at risk. Right. Or how is the boss looking at them? And so it's still like a status thing. Like, did your boss put you in charge of this? Like, does he want you to take charge of this, type of deal, or having those type of conversations? So in that scenario, what angle do you sometimes play?
So regardless of what you're selling, you need to be the subject matter expert on whatever that is. Because if you're not, then you're never really going to truly understand what motivates them, whether that's the fear and the pain, or whether that's the reward and the ego side, right? So that's the first thing I would ask is, who am I talking to? It's not about what did they gain out of it. It's how is Scott motivated?
Yep.
What is it that drives him?
Yep.
Because if I understand what drives you, pain or reward, then I can frame the selling of my product or service in that context. But then I can dig a little bit deeper in it. And when you talk about this in a corporate sense, the bottom line is that no matter how good you are, corporate sales aren't overnight. They're not short cycle sales. They might not be long cycle like government, but they're probably medium 30 to 60 day sales processes, right? So I have a little bit of time to get to know you, to figure out what it is that drives you. And then what is it that's the hangups of you saying yes to this deal? The only way I could do that is to get to know you and ask really good questions.
Yes, agreed. 1,000%.
Scott, why were you taking a look at this program in the first place, or this service in the first place?
Yeah.
Right. So what was it for you? Oh, my boss told me to call. Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're just doing what you're told. Yeah. Did your boss give you any indication of why he wanted you to call? Like, what's his angle?
Yeah.
So I start to dig a little bit deeper into, why are we here having this conversation today? And then somewhere in there, I need to start asking you personal questions of how does this serve you? How does this advance you? If you're reward based, what happens if you fail with this project? If you're pain and fear reward oriented, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I would navigate that particular scenario.
I agree. That's really interesting. You and I both kind of have that same view. At the very beginning of a call, like the first time I meet anybody, I'm really looking for 3 P's, and it's their perception of me, their perspective of the world, and the purpose that they're there. Right? Like, you need to get those questions because, like you said, oh, why did you call? You need to get that world perspective from them. My boss. So you're just an order taker? Is that what you're doing? And you're just kind of navigating? Cool. At least I know where I'm starting, right? Yep. And because those 3 P starting points, again, what's the purpose of the call? Hey, I've got 10 people to call today. I'm just trying to line up some meetings. Cool. I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time here on this individual, but you have to know all of those. Otherwise, you're shooting in the dark. And that's where
totally shooting in the dark.
Professionals, when you're following a script, they never start there, right? Yep. Like, and so now you literally are blindfolded and spun around and trying to spin the tail on a donkey, and it's sending you nowhere. It's why so many people struggle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something you said,
gotta be willing to ask the questions.
You do. And, you said something earlier, kind of when you were talking about the life insurance, and you said, how long do you want your wife to go before she has to get remarried, right? And being pretty blunt with people. It's one thing, too, that I'm very comfortable at. I can tell you're very comfortable at. And it's what I call PDQs, pretty direct questions. If you ask some pretty direct questions, you get some answers pretty darn quick. And so when do you feel like you can go really direct with somebody? Like, do you feel like you're able to do that right at the very beginning, or do you feel like
I wouldn't do that at the beginning? So Well, again, I think this really depends on what your product or service is and who's your ideal client, right?
Correct.
So if I'm in a corporate setting where I know you've got 25 calls after me, then you're going to appreciate me going, hey, let's stop beating around the bush and get straight to the point. Why are we on this call? Right?
Yep.
So, and if I'm the guy that's initiating the call, then I say, hey, Scott, I know you're a professional too. You probably got 25 calls. Can I just be straight to the point and not waste your time or mine?
Yep.
Right? So it really depends on the environment. What environment are we in? Now, in life insurance, I would never be direct until the end because I'm going to build a relationship and see what the needs of the family are. And I'm going to try to measure where everybody's at in this conversation. Right? And then at some point, you know, if you're a good salesperson and you've done your homework on both the client and the product or the service, you know what his objection is going to be before it ever comes out. So in my pitch, I should have already addressed this issue so that then when it does get brought up, I can lay down the gallop.
1,000%. Yep. I think that's brilliant. I couldn't agree more. Looking at the sales, just in general, the good, the bad, the ugly. One thing I always like to talk about, we've, you know, talked about a lot of stuff, you know, good and bad. What's the ugly side of stuff that you're seeing out there right now?
So there's, I think probably the most ugly thing about sales is when people tie their self-worth to their performance, which then drives them to do unethical things.
Beautiful.
I mean, and we all know this is true because it doesn't matter how good you are, everybody suffers from this. The emotional roller coaster of success and failure, right?
Yep.
The bottom line is we're not going to bat 1,000% every month. Some months we're going to do 5%. Some months we're going to do 30, right? And what happens is that people get they tie their worth to their production instead of their activity. If we just do the activity, it will come out in the wash. Maybe this month's not a great month, but next month will be.
Yeah.
So you just got to stay after the activity.
And it's one of the things that just like with fitness, right? Anything in life, any path to success, are you doing a process that you know leads to success, right? Now, if you are following that, which majority of salespeople should be in an environment where you can follow a process, which has shown success. So it does come down to the action. And it really is hard from day to day sometimes, though, you know.
Yeah.
And
you know, you brought up fitness, right?
yeah,
I mean, we don't say this, and we know intellectually that this isn't true. You don't go to the gym and then tomorrow wake up 30 pounds lighter.
correct.
It just doesn't work. It doesn't work the same way in sales. Now, the issue is stop looking at the scale every day. Look at the scale periodically to check progress. But the reward is in the activity, because if you do the activity, eventually, by pure force, the weight has to come off.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, talking fitness, it's funny when I'm working with businesses, and I use a lot of fitness analogies because, like, I didn't invent a push-up, I didn't invent a squat, I didn't invent dieting, right? Like, none of that stuff, you know, and you didn't invent sales, right? But we all have our own unique skills when it comes down to it, perspective, all of those type of details. And sometimes I have to have people look at those data points, because that's where we gauge success. And if we look at, you know, a sales rep that's not performing very well, and let's just say on average he's closing 1 in 5, right? And over 50 calls, it's not always 1 in every 5th one he's closing, right? And sometimes a sales rep, they're getting those 10 sales out of those 50. Sometimes they go 10 without, then they get 2, another 10, and then I run a 5. But the problem is some sales reps, when they're going that run of zeros and then they get 1, they're trying to catch back up rather than just stay the course. So how do you help people just stay the course?
Got it. So this is so great because I love the numbers conversation. You have some people, numbers don't matter. Some people, numbers matter. And, you know, when you talk about your, you know, your KPIs or whatever your industry calls them, none of that matters. Here's what does matter. Numbers tell us a story.
Yep.
And if we look at numbers from the perspective of a story to educate us on what's happening, not whether we're right or wrong, but to educate us on what's happening. So for example, I'm going to make 100 phone calls. I make 100 phone calls at 7 a.m. and nobody answers. I make 100 phone calls tomorrow at 7 a.m. and nobody answers.
Yep.
I make it Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday and nobody answers. Is my problem my activity or my time?
Yep. Beautiful.
Right?
Yep.
The story is not the activity. The story is the time. So let's switch the time. So now I call it 8:30 and 20 people out of 100 answer. Okay. Now out of that 20, I'm only closing one. And every day I call 100 people and out of 20 people answer and one person closes. Now what story does that tell me? I don't know. It depends on the industry, right? Maybe
Yep.
1 out of 20 that answer is a good ratio. Maybe it's not, right? Who
Yep.
knows? But what I'm looking for is the story. What does these numbers and that story tell me?
Agreed.
And then take the problem is that our financial security is not based on our actual activity, it's based on our production. So we begin to attach our value to the production instead of the activity,
Yep.
forgetting that the activity tells the story. So we need to become experts of what the story is telling us, not the production.
Yes.
Because Jim Rohn said this: if you take two guys, one guy calls 10 people and closes 5, and then he's done. One guy calls 10 and he gets 1, but he calls 150 people. Who wins?
Yep.
Right? And then eventually those ratios will change anyway. Because if you consistently call 100 people a day, maybe 20 answer and only 1 for your first month signs, but the next month 2, and then the next month 3, and the next month 4. So again, we have to look at what the story is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another great, and I'm glad you brought up the Jim Rohn one, and I do love that conversation too. And he goes further, kind of, and in a certain amount of time, the guy number 2 is just crushing. It goes back to like Kobe Bryant and his Mamba mentality, and he talked about how he started training in the morning and then afternoon and then the evening, right? Like after that first rookie year, he made the playoffs and he missed like 5 shots in a row, and he went back and watched the tape. And he said all shots were online. It's just they were all short. My legs were tired. I wasn't used to an 82 game season. So I had to get stronger. And then he was trying to improve and become one of the best, of going, hey, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, I'm going to study these people. Maybe I can never reach that level, but let's go find out. And he goes, if I train in the morning, afternoon, and evening every single day, I'm going to catch up to these people within a year or two. But a year or 2 down the road, I'm gonna be so far past them. Doesn't matter what they do, they can never catch up. That's and right. Very often we don't look at those data and look at the story of what's actually leading us properly there. And I think it's one of the biggest problems with salespeople out there, and even sales managers, or somebody's looking at a sales team. They're not looking at some of those details. They're going basically just off production. And why I think some sales teams and managers just end up tanking things because they're not paying attention to that stuff. Have you seen it happen too or not?
Yeah. Well, I think you see that no matter what the industry is. If you're not paying attention to the KPIs, you're going to get lost, right? And it goes back to kind of the script conversation. If I don't have a framework, then how do I know what's working and what's not? If I don't track the story, then how do I know what's working or not? How do I know I'm calling too early or too late if I don't track when I call, right? And here's the other thing, because you brought this up, and this is so important, about how do you mentally kind of stay in the game? And it's actually a super easy question to answer. So think about this. If I told you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, 1,000% certainty that if you call 500 people this month, you'll make 20 grand. It's a certainty. Would you call all 500 people?
1,000%.
1,000%. Well, listen, the statistics are pretty across the board. It doesn't matter what the industry is. Across the board, the rough statistics are for every phone calls, 20 people will answer. Out of every 20, you'll set 3 to 4 appointments. Out of 3 or 4 appointments, you'll set 1 to 2 closes. That's nationwide, industry-wide, just kind of the average statistic. So if you think about it, regardless of what your industry is, regardless of what your commission is or what your base plus OTE is, none of those things. If the bottom line is if I call 400 people a month, I should roughly book 10 to 12 appointments. Out of that, I should have roughly, 4 to 6 closes.
Yep.
So if you've got to make X amount of dollars, that means you have to make X amount of calls, period.
Yep.
Look at the activity. And the great thing is that eventually that number will change because you'll get better.
Yep. 1,000%. And you're quicker and easier. And when you break it down like that, right? Like people are going to watch this and be like, oh, well, I'm going to go do that. What, and when you break it down even smaller and go, hey, it's literally 25 calls a day.
Yeah.
Why don't many reps actually end up doing the 25 calls a day they need to?
Yeah. It does. I mean, in the technological age, it doesn't even necessarily have to be 25 calls anymore.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
It could be a combination of 15 calls, 10 texts, right?
Yep.
Because the bottom line is I'd much rather you text me first because I got calls going on, I got podcasts going on, right? And
Yep.
I'll be far quicker to actually answer a text than I am a call, only because of schedule.
Yep.
Even in the B2B world, texting is still a legitimate offer. Track all of that stuff. Now, if you're only texting, instead of 100 call, you need to do more like 225 texts to get that same result, right?
Yeah.
But and because we are always going to have, depending on the value proposition, you're always going to have to get on the phone or be in person, depending on what we're talking about. But
yeah, and there are different variables there. I've actually closed 20K deals through DMs. I know people have closed 50K deals through DMs and stuff like that, and never meeting a person face to face. Now, majority of people don't have the ability to do that for multiple reasons. And it's not just a sales skill set, it's everything that leads up to that potential type of deal as well. And so there's a lot of variables kind of play around, but I couldn't agree with you more. Looking at working with you, right? There's a lot of sales coaches out there. Obviously, our conversation so far, I've absolutely loved. It shows who you are, your thought process through things. What's something, if somebody was looking at you or John Doe sales coach, and they were having a conversation going, hey, John, why should I hire you over this individual? What would you say to them?
Well, there's a couple of different things. It would really depend. So I have a joke. I tell people this. My name is Juan, not Jesus. I can work magic, not miracles, right? So I don't know that it's really about me versus somebody else. It's more about you, right? Like at the end of the day, sales coaching is sales coaching. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we're talking, doing life insurance sales or tech sales. Sales is sales. So the question is not whether I'm better than you. The question is are you going to work? And then who do you fit with more in personality, right? I would hate to coach with somebody that every time they spoke, their voice drove me crazy. Or for me, just me personally, I do not like Excel sheet guys, like the real super technical, like that would drive me crazy, right? So for me, when I'm going to potentially hire a coach to work for me, to help me, I got to know that you're the type of person that speaks my language, is willing to get in my face, but you're not the type of personality that's so antithetical to mine that everything you say puts me to sleep. So and again, I think coaching really makes its money in its accountability. Because like in our conversation today, yeah, maybe you learned one little tweak from me and I learned one little tweak from you. Is that going to change your career? Probably not. Where the money and the magic in coaching is keeping you accountable and having a sounding board for you to solve problems with.
Yeah.
It's not really that I come up with your solutions. It's that I help you think them through and talk them through. And
I love you, John. I love your answer there for a lot of different reasons. Because there are a lot of people when they get, if someone asks that question to other certain individuals, they would get a completely different answer. And your answer was probably the most truthful, honest one. It's the way I deal with my clients as well. If I'm talking to somebody or a lead, I'm going to be completely transparent. Hey, if I'm building out marketing or I'm building out funnel or going to coach you in sales, whatever it may be, I'll tell you what, there's this person out there that's way better than me. There's this person out there that's better than me. There's this person out there that's way worse than me. Those type of variables, right? But what are you going to put in? And it's one of the things too, when it comes down to rubber meeting the road, talking to a client, sometimes you have to make sure that they're committed to do the work. Because you and I both know when it comes down to sales, it doesn't matter what coach you have if you're not actually putting in the work. Like you need to do it.
You're not picking up the phone. Like, it
right.
don't matter who you hire. You're going to fail.
Yes. And if you're not practice what you're preaching and iron sharpens iron, right? Like you need there. And that's where that accountability comes in. But you brought up the personality. And I think that's a huge thing that a lot of people miss. They buy marketing and get sold through marketing, and they get into something that is really bad, right? But that was their fault. I'm gonna call a spade a spade. It's been the biggest problem with the online space. There's a bunch of people out there that sell their services for a lot of money, and there's no deliverability. There's very little results, a lot of issues on the back end. And then people think that it's all like that. And you have to you have to blame that individual that's providing that service and doing that, because I'm not going to call him a scam artist, but it's not ethical business the way I like to perceive business.
Sure.
But that's the main thing of like, what did you learn from that situation? So what do you know now? So what are you looking for now? And I think that's where we're at with a market space too, of where through this conversation, I bet you people will listen to it and they did learn more than just one little thing from you. And it's going to be something that can actually change the trajectory of their career because they're looking at something differently now. And I think that is really important. We have to sometimes have our eyes open to a different perspective or to an additional data point that we didn't realize. And I think you brought up a lot of things that will potentially do it for a lot of people. But your personality, I think that's a huge part to the person you're hiring. Do you and I mesh, right?
That's right.
Tell you the truth, my nemesis is an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm glad you hate them, right?
Oh, yes.
I'm the same way. But I also know from your background, military, 6-time MMA champion, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Dude, you've got the work ethic, you've got the leadership, you've got the accountability, you've got the actions, you've got the results, right? I know that that's going to be instilled with your coaching. Yeah. And I know that's going to be some of the biggest game changers. It's not even about the sales, but how am I going to be leveled up being around you? Yeah. And that's going to be something that people have to realize too. And I hope they do. If they're watching this, I'm like, oh gosh, I should reach out to this John guy. So often sales skills isn't just the ability, but it's the internal game we play, the mental game, and to hit that grind. And I without a shadow of a doubt, I know that you're holding these people to a higher standard, which you're going to help them get more results because of that standard as well. So I think it's extremely profound. Now, I know we both have hard stops here. Underneath, I'm going to have some links so people can get a hold of you. It'll be LinkedIn and stuff like that, so people can find you there. I'm also glad you brought that nugget in there. A lot of people are missing out on LinkedIn. And truthfully, it's one of the areas I got to focus more on as well. But besides getting a hold of you, is there anything you want to leave people with?
Yeah, so here's what I would say, guys. Regardless of where you're at in your sales career, and regardless of how much money you're making, we see this in every sport, okay? There's something that every athlete has in common with everybody else in sports. Every athlete from the age of 4 to the age of 40, or whenever they retire, has a coach. Every single one. Yep. If you want to perform better, you need somebody with outside eyes taking a look at what you're doing. Whether that's me, whether that's whoever, whether that's your best buddy who holds you accountable at work, doesn't matter. The secret, as you know from fitness, to any kind of progress is accountability. Typically speaking, not always, typically speaking, accountability doesn't work in hierarchy where it can lead to termination.
Yes.
So it's good to have somebody look at what you're doing from an outside perspective. And it says something when the most successful people in the world, the Tom Brady's, the Michael Jordans, the Kobe's, the whoever, the Warren Buffett's, the Phil Towns, all of those guys have one thing in common. They have coaches. Yep. So don't shy away from that embrace that sacrifice to make your game better, wherever you need it, whether that's on the mental side or the physical side or the technique side of sales.
Yeah. And you brought up a lot of good points there. One thing I want to add there, I think when it comes down to coaching, a lot of people miss. Everything you talked about was 100% true, but doing all that, yeah, you're gonna be able to point out things, right? Like, you're doing this, we need to adjust this, we need to fix this. One of those things that allows you to do, having somebody doing that for you and pointing that out, it conserves your energy to go out and perform the best.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things, whatever your goals are, especially with sales, would you rather work with John and have him point out exactly what you're doing, rather than you spending extra 2, 3, 4 hours a day trying to figure out on your own and then being exhausted going the next day? It saves you time, money, speeds up progress, saves you energy. And really, a lot of sales professionals, they're trying to make a very good living. Not easy, but simplistically, there's always going to be high stress in sales, but very good times where you're able to step away. To having a coach there bridges you to the most successful version of what you can. And it's really key. And John, I really think a lot of people.
Where do you live at in the country?
Right outside Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay. So I went to college in Minneapolis.
Beautiful.
So I'm in the South, and I remember this was like 1996, and I'll leave you guys with this. I heard an old school Southern preacher say this one time. They asked him, why does he read so much? He read all kinds of books. And he said, I read because for $10, I can take lifelong lessons and condense them into 2 hours. And I would challenge all of you guys that whether it's through reading, podcasting, or coaching, that's the idea. Is that we can accelerate our own growth so that we don't have to spend all that time learning it on our own. So
it's a beautiful perspective shift. I'm glad you left that last nugget there. John, it's been awesome having you on, meeting you. I would love to have you on again. I know you and I are probably gonna have some more conversations privately and stuff like that. But again, thank you so much for hopping on. It was amazing to have you.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.